Welcome back to another edition of the Gridiron Review. Coming up on the show, we'll review, of course, the big tilt between Broadneck and Meade. We've got high school playoffs and the points now starting to really come into focus. 4 teams for 2 spots in the 4A East region. And also Youth League playoffs get going this week. Those brackets will be up later on this week. You can go to aacounty.org and take a look at those. Bill, big one, Broadneck Meade. It was exactly as we thought. We said it right here. Rob Harris even said it. Look, people just assume that we're going to roll in here because we've played well, but Meade has athletes to match up in the passing game.
Right.
They did just that. And ironically, it's 2 Tyrese Watson runs that gets Broadneck the winning margin against the Mustangs on Friday night.
Right, well, I took some heat on Twitter from fans who
It was a touchdown.
Right, well, they could not believe that I was picking against Broadneck, and I'd picked against them the week before because they played at Old Mill and then at Meade, and I just felt like, Broadneck was due to lose. Plus, the way the prediction corner works, just so you folks know, everybody tends to pick the same teams. It gets
so if
to
you're
be,
trying to win prediction corner,
you
you've got to
pick
be different.
You got to pick some upsets.
That's
so
right.
I tried to take an upset, and I almost got it because Meade was in position to win this game. They were ahead and had the ball just shy of midfield. They did not convert a 3rd down situation. They decided to go for it on 4th down and did not get it, which gave Broadneck a short field. And really, that was the turning point. My guy, Bob Hoke from Capital Gazette, high school sports editor of the Capital Gazette, covered the game, and he told me that was the turning point of the game. Really, in hindsight, Meade should have kicked and tried to pin Broadneck deep, make them go the length of the field because they had not, Meade was playing pretty well defensively. They're the first team to really, somewhat control the Broadneck offense. And, as you see, the Broadneck had been beating opponents by, I think, an average of almost 30 points a game. Meade gave Broadneck all they could handle. It's exactly what Rob Harris expected. And he mentioned in the paper, his comment was, this is good. We needed this. You don't want to go into the playoffs having not played one single close game, never having been in a tight one. And so this, in a lot of ways, was good for Broadneck.
Yeah, Darian Strawn had given Meade a 21-14 lead. And, the Mustangs riding high and feeling good about themselves. But obviously, Tyrese Watson's 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns lead the Bruins to victory there. Now, Broadneck, of course, atop the table at North Point. Both teams are undefeated, top of the 4A East. And as we were looking at the points, Bill, and the official numbers as of our taping are not out, but Arundel Old Mill almost seems as if now it is an elimination game of sorts.
I believe it is.
Depending on how the math will work out. Because technically now, you've got 3 teams at 6-2. You've got Meade, Arundel, and Old Mill all sitting there at 6-2. And based on who has who left,
right. Well, Meade already has a win over Arundel. We know that.
Yeah, but a 3rd loss for one of those teams would be critical and maybe devastating mathematically to their hopes here. And again, South River would be the 4th team that mathematically, still at 4-3,
yeah, they're
would still have a chance if somebody were to slip, if multiple teams were to slip up and get back into the 3-loss category.
Right. Also kind of important on that point is Rob Harris said, if we can finish undefeated, forget about the 4A. They're looking at overall number 1 seed, and I don't think they have that at the moment, but what they're looking to do is to avoid Wise in a semifinal matchup or a region. So
Wise and Eleanor Roosevelt played just a gangbuster game 2 weeks ago, and Wise, do they look like the juggernaut, unbeatable juggernaut they've been the last couple of years?
Not quite.
Maybe not quite, but they're still
good.
pretty good.
Yeah.
And you would much rather play them at home than away.
Right, and that's what I think Rob Harris is starting to look at now. They got to finish 10-0 because they're starting to look at the points overall within the entire state, not just the region.
All right, let's take a look at, obviously, Arundel Old Mill coming up. And Arundel, Bill, they've gone, they're running the ball well, and you know what great coaches do? If something's working, they don't try to change it up. They don't try to mess with it. And right now, Arundel doing things on the ground. Darius Hunter continues to be a man possessed running the football for the Wildcats.
Right, well, the run and shoot is becoming run with a capital R and then shoot a little bit with Ryan Sedgwick playing off the run. I mean, normally the way that Rundle's offenses worked is they throw that ball like crazy, then they hit you with the quick run when you're not expecting it. But clearly, from the numbers we've been seeing here recently, they have gone run-based offense. It starts with Darius Hunter. He's having a terrific season, by the way.
Yep.
I'm putting up some
234 yards and 3 scores this week.
Yeah, and he's had a couple games where he's been up around 200. He's routinely over 100. He's putting up big numbers. He's had a great year. And Old Mill won by blowout. It wasn't in the paper this week for you all. Might not have seen the result.
Actually, they didn't. They were losing, and there was panic.
I heard about that.
There was panic in Millersville on Friday night because Glen Burnie actually led 22-17 with just over a minute to go in this game, and a lot of the Old Mill populace, there was panic on the AA County message board, I can assure you.
Right. They did pull it out.
But the Patriots do pull it out and win 24-22. So
give Glen
they
Burnie
were
credit.
Caught looking ahead, but again, give the Gophers credit. I mean, we've seen a lot better football from a lot of these teams this year, a lot more competitive football, and this is another indication. But the Patriots do escape on the road here and set up the big showdown with the Rundle coming up this week. Should be a great game. Indeed there. South River stays alive mathematically here in the playoff hunt, easily getting by Southern. Problem is they get no bonus points right now from the Bulldogs, who are 0-8 on the season. Ryan Proctor with 4 catches, 85 yards, and 2 scores in that game. Did leave with an injury, so you wonder about his availability for South River over these final 3 games.
South River's dealt with some injury issues here. They lost their starting tailback. I noticed he did not play this week.
Still a great job by Coach Dolch and his coaching staff.
Yeah, absolutely. But they did the injury woes. I mean, they're not that deep in South River that they can afford it. But they keep winning.
No doubt about that. Northeast, another good story this year. 4-4
really
now after getting up over Severna Park. 26-21, Matt Wilhelm with a 19-yard field goal. They then had a safety on the final play of the game. So the Eagles now balance their record at 4-4. This is a nice win and continues to be a nice building block. And again, as we said a couple of years ago when they rebuilt the school, obviously the gorgeous new football stadium that they have there, it became kind of like, for the community, the in thing. It was cool again at Northeast, and maybe now starting to see some of the benefits of that with kids staying in the community instead of running off to a private school somewhere else, and now the Eagles turning out a much better, much more competitive football product.
All right, well, we talk about Zach Avies from Pasadena area. I don't know if you would have gone to Chesapeake or Northeast, but I can't tell you how often I see Archbishop Spalding, Mount St. Joseph loading up with Pasadena area kids. So, Northeast has been hit hard by the private schools that come in and recruit. They're playing tough, hard-nosed football. I like the way they play. It is great to see Northeast back in the mix. I mean, I remember back in my day of the 80s, Northeast was the dominant program. Ziz Raouf and Donnie Dorsey. I mean, Northeast was always right in the mix for the entire county, not just the old 3A, 2A league that you played in, Pete Medhurst.
That's right.
But, it's good to see Northeast back and getting a good coaching job.
And shortly after Ziz and them left, I believe my senior year, we beat them 53-0, something like that. Yeah, they went downhill pretty quickly after that, after Lenny Milliken and all those guys exited.
And old Bart Rader was their coach,
Yes.
God rest his soul. I just actually wrote about him. Bart passed away. I always liked Bart Rader.
Annapolis beat North County by a score 56-37 in a wild shootout as well, without any details. Now, over to the private side. Bill, we got a big one coming up in the B Conference. We got a showdown coming down the line, it looks like, here between St. Mary's and Severn. And both of them, I mean, let's face it, you're at the mercy of kids that want to pay tuition to go to those schools. Give both staffs a lot of credit, though. They have done a solid job, and we'll start, obviously, with the Admirals, who remain, undefeated. And, again, this is a case with them, it's next man up. They have to go to Wentz at quarterback, and all he's done is go in there and do the job. The lacrosse player is taking over quarterback, and they remain undefeated, trying to get that undefeated season. First time, if they were to complete it, at least they would get to 10-0.
Right. We found out that the 81 team that featured Beaver Petty and Willie Mitchell and so many.
How great a name is Beaver Petty.
Right, Howard Beaver Petty. But that team was loaded with talent. I could go on and on mentioning the athletes, a lot of great lacrosse players. A good amount of that team ended up playing Division I lacrosse. But that team went 9-0. Don't know why they didn't play 10-day games back in that day. But so Severn has opportunity to have the best record in program history. If they can finish a 10-0 regular season, that would be the best record in program history. And you mentioned Henry Rentz is filling in at quarterback. Craig Stevens had a great season as the quarterback all year. He's obviously injured. He's out now for this would be 2 games in a row, and Henry's done a great job filling in. But Severn is having an outstanding season, and St. Mary's wins by blowout. Then you can mention some of the details of that. But St. Mary's is now tied with Boys Latin. They both have 1 loss in the B Conference. This week, BL and St. Mary's play, and that is
At BL Friday at 4 o'clock.
crucial game because obviously that sets up who is going to have a chance to be in the championship against Severn. And, of course, at the end of the year, final game, Severn River Classic, St. Mary's versus Severn.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And obviously, when you look at the B Conference, great to see both of these teams performing well. St. Mary's getting the job done. Donald Day continues to have a great year, 179 yards, 3 touchdowns in the contest on 26 carries. And Day's really been a workhorse for them. And when we start, as we start talking about all county and which encompasses public and private, going to be some really tough decisions.
A lot of good running backs out there, right? But Donald
some
Day's
very
put
tough
up the numbers. Again, St. Mary's on a roll. They were struggling earlier on in the year. I think they lost 3 games in a row at one point. They have pulled it together during the B Conference portion of the schedule. So all credit to the coaching staff for getting St. Mary's ready for what really matters, the conference portion of the schedule. And that I'm really looking forward to that Severn St. Mary's showdown at the end of the year.
And obviously for Severn, it's Pilate next week, then St. Mary's, and then the winners play at Spalding on the 11th for the B Conference Championship.
And I don't think Spalding's going to be in the championship picture the way things are shaking out. Got killed by St. Francis this week.
I mean, again, you're talking about a team that recruits basically from a 100-mile region.
Right. Right.
St. Spalding pretty much sticking to the area.
Right. I think St. Francis has something on the order of about 12 players currently committed to Division I schools, either juniors or seniors. They are loaded. But, Spalding was giving them all they could handle. I think Spalding was winning that game 7-0 right around halftime. And St. Francis turned it on in the second half and just pulled away big time.
Meanwhile, AACS beat Mount Carmel C Conference action. The Eagles right now undefeated 4-0 in the C Conference as Ryan Eidelman threw for 3 touchdowns, and our boy Sam Akimukami ran for 2 scores for the Eagles as they destroyed Mount Carmel by a score of 39-6. Ironically here for the Eagles, they have allowed just 8 points in 4 conference games. So
very impressive.
So the Eagles having another fine season in the C Conference. That's a look at our high school slate. Coming up, we'll take a look at the colleges. A tough day for Maryland and Navy, as well as the pros coming up as well. You're watching the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Bill and I were in Annapolis for Navy and UCF. 20th ranked Knights, Bill, as good as advertised. Navy
Legit.
right there, though. 24-21, fourth quarter, with Garrett Lewis, the backup in the game due to Zach Abe's potential head injury there after getting hit in the side of the helmet. And unfortunately, Lewis, with probably what will amount to a bad read when they look at it on film, pitches the ball probably when he should have kept it. Daryl Bonner gets his sternum blown up. Ball ends up on the ground. UCF recovers, and they end up scoring on that drive to make it a 31-21 game. But for all of the backups that the Mids had turned to, Chris High was out in that game as well for Navy. Right there with the number 20 team in the country. But again, you have to play perfect football to beat good teams, and the Mids not quite as perfect as they needed to be.
Well, I think this is what's really disturbing Coach Ken Niumatalolo is all these little errors that are adding up, the turnovers, the penalties. Micah Thomas intercepts a pass, returns it 30 yards, sets up Navy in Central Florida territory. As it turned out, Navy did pick up a first down. If they had not had a block in the back penalty by Justin Norton, which brought that wonderful return back 15 yards, they would have been in field goal position. So it at least had an opportunity to tie the score. That's one of those little errors. You had earlier in the game, Malcolm Perry busts loose for a 30-yard touchdown run. Tyler Carmona called for holding kind of behind the play. By my view, it appeared that his block that was a hold would not have altered whether Malcolm scored. So it's these little things that are really frustrating Ken Niumatalolo. 3 more turnovers. You had the fumble, Daryl Bonner off the bad pitch, as you mentioned, 2 interceptions. Now one was desperation at the end as they were trying to get down the field in the final possession. But all of it is adding up to not Navy football. And in these games against Memphis, against the Central Florida, both of which are ranked, absolute legit opponents, can't afford it. And Garrett Lewis, I thought he played admirably in relief of Zach Abey, but that was an error of inexperience, in my opinion. He thought his pitch key had already come through, but the cornerback then became the pitch key. And what he should have done is force that cornerback to commit. And the shame of it is, had he gotten the cornerback to commit to him, Garrett Lewis then could have pitched to Darryl Bonner, who, from what I saw, there was no one else out there.
And Lewis probably could have turned it up himself and at least got enough for the first down.
Right.
Meanwhile, Maryland goes to Wisconsin, gets blitzed by the Badgers. And Maryland offensively right now, it's
a mess.
Limitations at quarterback, and clearly they just can't run the offense Walt Bell wants to run. Good running backs with Ty Johnson and Lorenzo Harrison, but I mean, right now when your quarterback just not making plays, you can't beat people like Wisconsin without a quarterback.
Right. I mean, it's just Maryland's a little bit in over their head at the moment, talent-wise, in the Big Ten. And you play a team like Wisconsin, which is so physical on both sides of the ball. I mean, the first series of the game, they get in there and hit Max Bordenschlager as he's trying to throw. It's a pick six. I mean, that's no way to start a game on the road. Just like that, you're down 7-0. And as you mentioned, Ty Johnson had a pretty good game. He ran for like 75 yards. There were moments when Maryland was able to move the ball, but just not enough consistency of an offense to beat a team like Wisconsin on the road.
You know they still have to play?
Oh, this
Michigan
schedule is
Michigan
brutal.
State, Penn State.
Right. Well, I'm not quite sure.
I do get Rutgers, though.
Right.
Who beat Purdue, by the way.
They've played Wisconsin 3 years in a row, but yet they have yet to play Illinois. I'm not quite sure how this Big Ten schedule works, but Maryland has really been banging their head against the wall. They're playing a rough Big Ten schedule. They're not getting any of the easier teams on the schedule.
Yeah, obviously that Rutgers game was supposed to be Yankee Stadium, got moved back to Piscataway.
Right. You know what, the Yankees
thought the Yankees could be in the World Series, and unfortunately now they're.
I think what happened is the Yankee brass saw who's going to this game between Rutgers and Maryland, and we could have an empty Yankee Stadium, and it would be a bit embarrassing. So I think the whole idea of the Yankees maybe in the World Series was an excuse to get rid of that game and push it back to Piscataway.
Maybe the Ravens should have pushed their game back to Minnesota or back to Baltimore
Right.
or maybe Saskatchewan, which is north of the border. We'll talk about the pros when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Vikings, Ravens. Well, Bill, if you like purple, it was on display in Minnesota on Sunday. Unfortunately, not enough offense again for the Ravens as they lose to the Vikings 24-16. And, of course, the Steelers win again over the Bengals, so the distance gets larger between the Ravens and the Steelers within the division.
This offense is ugly. It really is. I mean, they lost Mike Wallace early to a concussion or potential concussion.
He was looking for his helmet, too.
He was wandering around where he was looking in equipment trunks. Where is my helmet? When they take your helmet away, you do not find it. He was getting angry, yelling at people. But they had already, Jeremy Maclin was declared out before the game even started. So you're down to a receiving core of Michael Campanaro, Chris Moore, and what's that
Griff
kid?
Whalen.
Griff Whalen, the one and only. Totally
Former
handicapped.
teammate of Andrew Luck at Stanford and with the Colts.
Just a handicapped offense. I mean, you know, Joe Flacco is not playing good football, but he has no weapons to work with. But again, the defense. I mean, the Brandon Williams came back and says supposedly was going to help the rushing defense, and Latavius Murray, who's done nothing all season. I think he had 69 yards total coming into the season, and he busts loose for like 146. One play, he goes right up the middle, which is where Brandon Williams was supposed to be holding the fort. And Terrell Suggs said it. Here's what he said about the Ravens defense. We stink. That's what he said. So it's just a bad picture for the Ravens. And the question is there hope that they're going to get better? Is there really, do you see anything that gives you encouragement about the Baltimore Ravens?
Not offensively. That's the big key is you got to score more points, stay on the field longer, help your defense out, keep them over on the sideline, let them rest a little bit more. Problem is you look around the AFC right now, there are a lot of teams now starting to get into this thing. The Dolphins came from behind to beat the Jets, who are surprisingly in this thing.
And that's who the Ravens play on Thursday Night Football.
The AFC South is a mess right now, but Jacksonville trying to get to the top of the herd there. They won via shutout this week. So, and you look out west, and the Raiders finally, they are trying to get back into this thing, and the Chargers are playing well. They shut out the Broncos. Broncos hadn't been shut out since 1992 and got beaten by the Chargers 21-0. Of course, at the time of our taping, Redskins playing Monday Night Football with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Big game.
Talk about that next week. It's a big game. If the Redskins win, they're tied in the loss column with the Eagles. If not, then they're 2 games behind, which is more like 3 because the Eagles would have a sweep of the season series.
And it's in the friendly confines of Lincoln Financial Field.
It's a nice stadium. We've been there a lot.
Right. We will be there next Thursday night when Navy
We're
plays
going there
Temple.
twice this year, of course.
That's
Navy
right.
Temple on the 2nd, and then a month later, December 9th, for the Army Navy
We should
Classic.
mention that the Black Knights of the Hudson are bowl eligible
They
for
are.
the 2nd straight season. Jeff Monken
When
doing
you
a good
eke
job.
out wins over Eastern Michigan and
Temple.
Temple just gave them the game this past week.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Final possession, the Army's down a touchdown with their backup quarterback in because their regular quarterback doesn't throw, and they score late and then win it in overtime as Temple was
Just listening to Jeff Collins on the American Athletic Conference teleconference, and he said that the Army backup quarterback threw the ball as well as any quarterback in the country. I find that hard to believe that he's as good as any quarterback in the country. But
If he was as good as any quarterback in the country, he'd be playing instead of Ahmad Bradshaw and not because of Ahmad Bradshaw late in the contest. Hey, again, reminder, football playoffs get started this week. Turf facilities all throughout Anne Arundel County. Go to aacounty.org, go to Recreation and Parks page, team schedules, and you can find out the complete list of the playoff brackets coming up. This week is our journey to a championship at Chesapeake High for Championship Day gets underway. That'll do it for us. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching this week on our edition of Gridiron Review.